Welcome back to the channel. AJ here, and in today's video, we're going to be reacting to 11 bartenders make an old fashioned by Epicurious. You may or may not know this about me, but I have on and off bartended for like the past 15 years, more recently in the past few years. And I teach bartending to both like people who want to become bartenders. It's like one of my businesses. I also teach like mixology classes to adults. It's like my kind of like my hobby, but also like a job sort of for me. Because of that, I have opinions and I end up on bartender YouTube a lot. This video came across my YouTube when I was watching it on my TV with my wife, and it was called 11 Bartenders Make an Old Fashioned. And I started playing it and I was like, oh man, I just know there's going to be a cranky boomer on here who like demands the red maraschino cherries and club soda and makes an abomination of an old fashioned. And so I started to play it and I was getting very vocal is what my wife was saying. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to stop watching this. And she goes, good. And I'm like, well, okay, I'm glad that made you happy. But the main reason I'm going to stop is because I think it would be more fun to create a reaction video around it, especially on a day where maybe I don't have as much energy to create something of my own. So here we are. So we're going to be reacting to this video. I did see like the first minute and I did have some opinions. I will probably share those with you, and then we'll finish watching the video together. The 11 different styles of old fashioned, and what's the right one? Because there is a correct answer. I'm going to see if any of these guys get it. Did you see the green old fashioned? Don't know what that is, but actually it looks kind of cool.
So an old fashioned essentially is going to be whiskey, it's going to be sugar, and it's going to be bitters.
Correct. This guy is correct. That is what an old fashioned is. I would probably say, just from the vibes of this guy already, I feel the most aligned with him. I think I've also seen this guy create other content, like cocktail content, and he does align with kind of my mindset around how to make cocktails and stuff like that. But correct. I think the original old fashioned was made with rye whiskey, not bourbon, and it was literally just like bourbon, sugar, and I think that's it, maybe bitters. So I like kind of staying true to form with like that traditional style. I do think, you know, more often than not you should make it with bourbon nowadays, but well, I'll let this guy keep.
When it comes to making a good old fashioned, there are a number of factors. Number one, I want it not too sweet. I know people say that a lot, but it is so true in the old fashioned.
Dude, the thing about sorry, I'm already starting, I guess, but the thing about the old fashioned is like as a bartender, that is the like I hate when people ask me how is your old fashioned, because look, I get it if you're particular about how your drink is, but I feel like more often than not people are asking me that to try to be cool, and they don't actually even know what that question means, because really it's like the simplest drink in the world, right? It's like whiskey, a little bit of sugar, and bitters, just like homie here said. So it's not like this crazy complicated thing that people make it seem like. It's like the most complicated cocktail and that only some people can make it correctly. I agree with this guy here that it should be not that sweet. I feel like, again, that's just a cool thing to say. Some people want it a little sweeter, and that's fine. But for the most part, you're essentially drinking like slightly sweetened, less burny bourbon, right? Like that's mainly what you're getting with an old fashioned. It's not the most complex drink in the world. It's kind of just accentuating the bourbon. I guess maybe I should get into how I make my old fashioned too. I don't know. Maybe I'll do it throughout here, or maybe I'll do it at the end, or maybe I'll edit it and put it in the beginning.
Number two, the spirit that I use. I want the proof to be up there. I don't want an 80 proof. I don't want an 86 proof whiskey. That's great for shaking whiskey cocktails, but I got to get up to the mid 90s on my proof, or even 101.
This guy is correct. We could end the video. I think he got it. No, you should use an overproofed whiskey, I think, in almost any bourbon cocktail, unless you're really trying to like hide the taste of the bourbon, because if you start mixing other stuff in there, you're not going to taste it. You're just going to taste all the things you mix. Like a drink I like to make a lot for myself or other people is a paper plane, which is a bourbon cocktail. But I find if you don't use an overproof, and overproof just means above 80, you're not going to taste any bourbon at all. And then you're not really even getting it doesn't feel like a bourbon cocktail, right? In the same way we're like a gin cocktail, whether it's like a gimlet or a martini, you want to taste the botanicals from the gin, right? It's not like vodka, where vodka for the most part is flavorless. So I agree with this. And I think that should just be the rule for all bourbon cocktails.
This is a spirit forward cocktail. So The first thing you're going to use in an old fashioned is bitters. Bitters are the spice rack of your bowl.
Again, correct. They're kind of like the spice rack of your drink, right? They're kind of the salt and pepper. I mean, sometimes there's other types of bitter forward drinks, but for the most part, it is the spice rack of your cocktail. Yes, correct. This guy, I want to be friends with you, craft bartender. Tim. Is his name Tim? Great. Tim, let's be friends.
I love the spice that comes with Angostura bitters. So I'm going to use 3 dashes in this. So this is going to give you that punch with that spice that's been mixed. It's 200 years old. This is the most tried and true one that there is.
Angostura bitters should be in there, or if you're going to use a different brand, because Angostura is a brand similar to like Jacuzzi is to like whirlpools and things like that, or hot tubs. It's just a type of brand. It would be called aromatic. And one of the things I do a little differently is I also throw orange bitters in there, just because you're going to put an orange peel in there probably anyway, and so you want a little bit of that flavor. But that's a me thing.
How much bitters do you want to use? That's up to each person. That is always different. Next.
The right answer is 4 dashes.
Is the sugar. Traditionally, people would use sugar cubes back in the day and muddle that until that was dissolved. Nowadays, we have syrups.
Yes. Again, this guy's right. Sugar cubes is the old school way to do it. So and muddle it and it seems cool or whatever. I think it's fine to do that, but I mean, it's been a long time since the old fashioned came to being, and I think we have better ways of doing this. I typically find a Demerara syrup, 2-to-1, is the standard for most drinks. You could just do normal simple syrup, but I think Demerara, that specific type of sugar, almost lends more to a cane sugary, brown sugary flavor. So it gives you a little bit of a deeper flavor without going overboard. So I would typically say a Demerara syrup and 1/4 of an ounce. But that's, again, I'm just telling you the right way to make it. You can make it however you want.
Is a Demerara syrup. This is a 2-part sugar to 1 part water by weight concoction. We say to use 1/4 of an ounce in this. I don't go all the way up to that 1/4 ounce line because I don't want it to be too sweet. Now, the argument on the whiskey, you can do bourbon or do you want rye? We can do either. Bourbon's going to be a little more sweet. So people who want a little more kick and spice are going to choose rye. I'm going to use a rye right now. This is 90.4 proof. It's probably the lowest end of what I would go with on this one. How much whiskey are we going to put in here? We're going to do 2 ounces.
Again, rye and bourbon are both fine. It kind of changes what it is a little if you switch to rye, but it also is historically accurate. So I think it's cool. I would typically make it with a bourbon just because an old fashioned is more commonly known as a bourbon cocktail, right? Just like historically martinis are a gin cocktail, but nowadays what most people actually want is just really cold vodka served up. And so you should kind of update your standard with what is the most common, because you're in a service industry, right? You're here to help whoever or to give serve somebody what they want to drink and not make them feel stupid for what they want to order, or make them feel not as cool because, oh, you want a vodka martini instead of a gin, or, oh, you want, rye instead of bourbon. Just make it with whatever they want. But yeah, I think bourbon is the standard and what most people would presume when they're ordering an old fashioned.
We're going to fill it up. I want to get to that meniscus, so it just goes right up over the edge and boom. We have all of our ingredients in here. What do we need? Ice. Vanilla ice. We're going to stir it. We're not shaking it. We want the slow dilution on there. We don't want to make this a water whiskey cocktail.
That's kind of obvious, I feel. For the most part, if you're in the service industry, you do not shake an old fashioned. You typically, it's a stirred drink because you want it not as watered down. You also don't want the airiness that comes with shaking it. Sometimes drinks have kind of a foaminess on the top or a frothiness. You don't want that for an old fashioned, because again, you're just zhuzhing up some bourbon so that it tastes extra yummy and it goes down smooth, right? That's really my feeling on it. So of course it should be stirred.
When I put this on your table, I want you to see a beautiful block of ice that has not been melted down at all. We have a stamp because branding of ice has become very vogue in the current climate. We got the PB for Pebble Bar here. Once I've stamped that, there's going to be water at the bottom of that. I want to dump that water out. So we have our old fashioned. If I've done it well, it's perfectly diluted, not too sweet, already cold on that block of ice. So every old fashioned you get should come with an orange twist. What we do and some other places do is we also add a lemon twist. Ready to go? I give you our old fashioned.
This is like pretty much how I make an old fashioned. I don't throw the lemon twist in, though that's fine. I think anything that is like different from what this dude just made here is effectively like a deviation. And like, with the exception of the rye instead of the bourbon, you're kind of changing what it is, which is fine. You can have a different thing and call it whatever you want, but it's not traditionally what is being thought of as an old fashioned to by most craft cocktail standards now. Again, the kind of like boomer old school version is like throw a bunch of club soda in there. It better have a cherry, muddle my cherry, throw a whole orange wedge. And that's like, I hate that shit personally, but I'm sure somebody here is going to make it. So let's keep going.
An old fashioned has to start with muddled fruit.
That's what I'm saying. You see? This is when I got a little frustrated. So like candidly, I already knew this was coming, and this is when I paused because I'm like, oh my god, no, it does not need to come with muddled fruit. And I would make the case that it's kind of a different drink if you're muddling the fruit. You don't want a bunch of fruit in your old fashioned. It's a bourbon cocktail. It's a very old school, boomery, not keeping up with the times way to do it. And I don't even think it's that good. It's not, whatever. Okay, we'll keep going. You can make your thing. I'm sure it's fine.
A lot of the young bartenders now put the cherry and the orange, the sugar and the bitters in it, and they do a twist, and you don't get the flavors of the fruit the way you should be. If you gave me an old...
You shouldn't be getting the flavors of the fruit. This isn't a tiki drink. It's an old fashioned, but go off.
Fashioned didn't start with muddled fruit, I'd send it back. So we're going to take our cherry, we're going to put the cherry in the glass, and take a slice of orange. We're going to take some bar sugar. Bar sugar is a quick dissolving sugar. Doesn't matter if you mix it with cold water, hot water, it dissolves instantly.
Everything about this sucks. If you'd send back a drink because it doesn't have muddled fruit in it, again, like you can ask for that, but do know you're asking for something out of the ordinary. Or if you go to this girl's bar, you're getting a very different take on an old fashioned, or at most generous, the old school way to do it. Also, your cherry, being a maraschino Shirley Temple style cherry, pretty cringe. Should probably be at least a Luxardo, which is like those black cherries that you get, at least if you're going to do this. I hate this already, but I'm sure it tastes fine, but it's not the same drink in my brain.
Now we're going to take our Angostura bitters, do a couple of dashes in there, get your muddler. The fruit has to be macerated. Then you're going to pour your bourbon in. Woodford is an extremely smooth bourbon.
Also, okay, I know I'm just poo-pooing on you. Maureen, I'm sure you're a nice person. I'm just, I'm mostly just memeing. You should be what's called using a jigger or a measurement tool for all of your cocktails, especially if you work in a bar, for two reasons. One, it's the same as like baking, why you want to measure things. But two, if cost, right? If you work in a restaurant, you have to know how much bourbon goes in a drink, right? So the first reason is the consistency and the measuring. And the second reason is being considerate to the owner of the business. Just dumping in a bunch of whiskey. I mean, maybe she just can eyeball it at this point. Maybe she's made these. I don't know how long she's been in the industry. I presume at least enough time to be on a channel like Epicurious. But the standard should be to measure out your drinks so that the proportions are correct.
And then you're going to put a splash of club soda on top just to cut the sweetness. And then you're going to put some ice cubes in. And there you go. There's your old fashioned.
This is horrible. I mean, like if you served me this as an old fashioned, I would be pretty bummed out. Like I would think I had ordered this in like the year 2000 from a steakhouse. Honestly, this was a little bit of a more popular way to do it. It's interesting that you put club soda later. Typically, I remember people putting club soda first, just to kind of help breaking down the sugar. It wasn't about cutting the sweetness or anything like that. But I would, like in the same way where she would send back a drink, if there was no muddled fruit in it, I would probably, if I was like looking for a classic old fashioned and this is what came out, I would say, look, I'm not trying to be a dick, but this is not what I had in mind, like at all. Especially if I was expecting what the dude before made, and this is what you served me in that glass. That's like a Nick and Nora coupe style glass. Like it should be in a rocks glass. Like there's a lot of things about this that are not my style. Again, she is allowed to have her preferences, as are you, but like there should be certain standards. And again, maybe that's just the nerdy like teacher in me.
Modern tropical bars usually tend to have really fun, unexpected ingredients. Today, I'm going to be making the Spam Fried Rice Old Fashions. We're going to be starting off with Angostura bitters. Every Old Fashioned should have Angostura bitters or some sort of bitters substitute. Brings a little bit more balance to the sweet and the spirit that you're using. So we're switching up the traditional sugar base by using a toasted rice syrup that we make in-house, emulating the flavors of fried rice, as well as a little bit of cane to give it a sweet undertone, but not an overt sweetness that you get from traditional simple syrup.
Already, what I like about this gal is that she is saying that this is a different take on an old fashioned. Great, you can do all the different takes you want. I think that's awesome. She's a tiki bartender, so tiki bars typically have different types of drinks. I love that she makes her own syrup. I like that she's measuring her drinks. I like that she says, hey, it's our spam fried old fashioned. Like, it's a different thing. And that's awesome. This looks super cool so far.
Now for the fun stuff. In a tiki bar like Paradise Lost, we love split basing our spirits. Split basing is a technique where instead of using just one spirit, we're kind of playing the game. Instead of whiskey, we're using a little bit of cane as well as a little bit of mezcal. Clarin is going to be a cane distillate from Haiti. Really beautiful, grassy, and selenic. Now for the star of the show, this is going to be our spam-infused mezcal.
Cool.
At Paradise Lost, the way that we get our spam infusion is to cube up the spam, fry it up, make sure that you get those little bits that are burnt on the ends and parts of char that you're missing from whiskey, and then just let it sit overnight inside some mezcal, strain it out, and then you have your spam mezcal.
This is pretty sick. See, this is like its own version. They're craft making everything. They're infusing the alcohol. They are, like, it is a wildly different type drink, and they're using mezcal as one of the bases. This almost reminds me of what's called like a Mexican old fashioned or an Oaxacan old fashioned, which is where mezcal and or tequila, typically reposado, are the base. But it still stays true to the type of like proportions so far. So I like this. I think it's cool.
And when you're stirring, you're really trying to focus on dilution, chilling, as well as keeping the clarity of the actual base that you're using. In my head, I have very specific counts of how many revolutions I want to stir for in order to dilute the proper amount down from what the starting proof is. For a base spirit that's around 40% alcohol, you kind of want to stir it around 60 revolutions. That gives it just about an ounce of dilution per cocktail. It gives you a way of elongating the drink, but still being able to taste all the flavors that are inside of your cocktail.
Pretty cool. Yeah, I like that methodology. For me, it's typically when you're using a stirred glass, you see how the outside is frosted there? I kind of, the way I teach it and the way I've done it is like you want the outside of that glass, the mixing glass, to be frosty because that means that the liquid on the inside is getting cold. But I like her counting mechanism as well. And that she mentioned that, yeah, your goal is to dilute it. You're just diluting it slightly, but you want it to stay clear, not muddled and dirty.
Traditional serve of an old fashioned. You have a really beautiful big ice cube in there so that it slows down the dilution. Large ice cubes will have less surface area, so that means that your drink's going to water down much slower and much less. Just going to give it a little bit of flair by stamping it with the Paradise Lost logo. Freshly grated nutmeg imparts a really beautiful aroma to the drink. Weird is always good. Let's get weird. I think we should be more weird.
I love that. I think that's really cool. I would love to try that. I think it's a great idea. And I think that's a cool take on a different form of an old fashioned.
Personally, I really like the kind of steakhouse old fashioned with the muddled cherries. But in order to make an old fashioned efficient, you have to be a little bit quicker. We're going to start with like 2.5 ounces of Misguided whiskey. It's a rye and bourbon blend.
Cool.
It's delicious. We free pour because it's a lot quicker to free pour. I'm going to do about 2 bar spoons full. Simple syrup. You don't want it to be too sweet. Douse it in some Angostura bitters. And just give it an orange peel. Boom, boom, boom. Old fashioned. Actually,
I think that's fine. Like I like that better than the steak muddled fruit old fashioned, honestly. Like, and for where she works, right? She's a club bartender. Like, people are not there for craft drinks necessarily. They're there to vibe and have fun, right? So to me, that's pretty good. Like, that's pretty much your standard old fashioned. It's just made, you build it in the glass instead of a mixing glass. I think that's fine too. And, yeah, you're just like omitting any of the things. Free pouring is free pouring. It's typical in like clubs and like dive bars and concert venues, like places with live music and things like that. So I don't disparage that at all. It's just different kind of vibe. This to me is good. I think this is good.
I like to keep my old fashions pretty classic. I mean, it's in the name. It's one of the original cocktails. When it comes to making old fashions, you always want to start off with your bitters. I like to do 3 heavy dashes of Angostura. I like to do 3 dashes of orange bitters as well. The orange bitters adds more of a citrus orange flavor without the acid. So you'll see a lot of people use straight granulated sugar. I don't like my old fashions with texture. I like mine pretty smooth, and I like mine to have body. So I always used a 2-to-1 rich syrup made with an unrefined sugar. And because I work with so many different chefs from all different backgrounds of cuisine, so I always use different sugars made all over the world. The one that I'm gonna be using right here is gonna be a Chinese slab sugar. So we're gonna do a scant or just below a quarter ounce of 2-to-1 syrup. For our base spirit today, we're actually going to do a split base, which means we're going to use 2 different spirits. We're going to be using rye whiskey today, which is 95 proof, which just means a little bit hotter. You have a little bit more of a peppery flavor profile to it rather than your vanilla, caramelly notes of bourbon. And one of the original cocktails that you may have seen a lot that is derived from the old fashioned is a Sazerac. So the original old fashioned Sazerac was made with cognac. And so as kind of a nod to it, and just because I really love cognac, I'm going to be doing 3/4 of an ounce.
I think this is pretty cool so far. So like for an experimental bartender, he's making it almost, I'm obviously my bias is showing. So because like this is almost how I would make it, except I wouldn't throw cognac in it. But like in terms of the sugar, the orange bitters and the normal bitters is to me the right way. Also, this dude's nails are pretty dope.
And then we're going to add some ice cubes to our Yari mixing glass. I always try to make sure that there's a bit of ice peeking out above the liquid. So if I'm stirring it and it goes below the ice line, that means it will dilute too fast. So now we're gonna pour. So I'm just expressing the orange peel as it's pouring in there, so it kind of gets the orange and lemon flavors into the cocktail a little bit more. You'll see a lot of people kind of wipe the edges. I don't like that because it just gets your fingers sticky. So I kind of just keep the orange oils and lemon oils on top and just stick them right in. Enjoy.
I think that's good. Yeah, I don't do the thing where I wipe it around the edge either. I'll express all the oils into like on top of the drink. And I mean, his way of doing it kind of as it pours is cool looking, but I think the more consistent way is probably to do it straight into the drink, because then you know it's kind of like a layer of orange oil. And you can kind of smell it when it gets served, which I think really cool. Other people have told me it's cool.
At the Plaza Hotel, we do a muddled old fashioned. An old fashioned doesn't have to be muddled fruit, but we thought that it would appeal to a greater audience. For my old fashioned, I'm going to start here with a sugar in the raw that I use. It's got a bigger grain to it, but it really muddles up really nice. I use 1 slice of orange and 1 Luxardo cherry. And then
you see how she's using at least a black Luxardo cherry. By the way, what is the difference between those two? I'm glad you asked. So maraschino cherries are like the bright red cherries that are put in like Shirley Temples. They're ones where basically they like take all the color out of it and then infuse it in basically like a sugar water to make them very sweet, right? Luxardo cherries are effectively the same thing, except there's alcohol in it. Luxardo is a type of liqueur. It's a maraschino cherry liqueur. And so they're kind of soaking it in that. So it's actually making those little cherries are alcoholic, which is why if you go to like a restaurant or something and your kid is like, oh, can I get a black cherry? A waiter typically won't serve it to them. They'll give them the red cherries because there's alcohol in those other ones. And even though it's trace, they're not allowed to do that, right? So I think if you're gonna muddle a fruit, I would do a Luxardo cherry like Homegirl here is doing. I would also like, if people want a cherry in their old fashioned, I'll throw it. I'll just throw it in after.
then I'm going to give it a little muddle here and add some Angostura bitters. So 3 good dashes. A lot of other bartenders use different spirits in an old fashioned, but ours is made the classic way with bourbon. I give it a nice little stir, and then I'm going to strain it onto a large ice sphere. We freeze solid blocks of ice, and we have this wonderful ice ball maker at the Plaza. It makes a beautiful spear right in front of the guest's eyes. And a round ice cube has very little surface.
That's what I was going to say. A round cube actually dilutes even slower than a square cube. So I think these guys have said it, but I don't know if it's going to make the final cut. So big ice cubes in old fashions and really any sort of like spirit forward drink, like especially whiskey drinks, are there because it melts slower. So if you have little cubes in there, it's actually going to melt faster, which is going to water down your drink quicker. But if you have a big square or a big sphere has the least amount of surface area, so it actually dilutes the slowest of all of them. So technically a sphere would be, quote, the best, I guess, or if your goal is to sip it for forever. But yeah, that's why big. You can make it with little ice cubes though. It's fine. Just make sure you put a lot, because I know it sounds like a lot of people think a lot of ice is like a bartender being an asshole to you. It's actually the opposite. If you put less ice in there, it's going to melt faster because the drink isn't as cold. So it's actually going to water down your drink even quicker. So if a bartender is giving you a shitload of ice, they actually don't hate you. They probably like you, or they nothing you. But giving you a little bit of ice is hurting your drinking experience.
So it melts even slower than a block of ice. So we have a stamp. It's got our logo on it. Finish it with an orange twist. This releases the oils over the drink. And a Luxardo cherry, because it's delicious. This is the classic garnish for an old fashioned at the Plaza Hotel. It's like a piece of old times in a glass.
I think there's no muddle. Like, I think this gal did a pretty good job on this drink. I would drink this pretty good because it's not a disaster like this one on the bottom left over here. This looks good to me. I like how they do it. I like that they use a not, like a browner sugar. So I think it's all good.
I think the biggest thing for old fashions is that they have to be balanced. The idea behind an old fashioned is that you're really just taking whiskey and letting it shine by adding small amounts of flavoring ingredients, but it's not supposed to hide the main ingredient, which at the end of the day is the whiskey. We start with a little Angostura bitters. I think this is where most bartenders get into trouble. I only use a teaspoon of Demerara syrup, and I think the majority of bartenders out there make the mistake of putting more simple syrup or some kind of Demerara in there, which makes the drink cloyingly sweet and way too round. It almost overpowers the rye and kind of knocks it off balance.
It's true, unless somebody specific. Again, you're there to make it for people, but like, unless somebody specifically is like, no, I want it sickeningly sweet. The less is typically more in an old fashioned.
We're going to do Rittenhouse rye. So to make it old fashioned, I find that 2.5 ounces of the rye is really where we want to be.
In case you didn't know, this is what flair is. When they say he's a flair bartender, it's basically people who can do sick tricks while they make your drinks. I'm super jealous of him, and I wish I could do all those things. But I don't know if I have the discipline or the bandwidth required to put in the effort to do those things. Also, Rittenhouse rye, super sick rye whiskey, especially for making cocktails. It's overproofed. It's 100 proof. It's kind of my standard rye.
So I'm going to stir this up really, really good, get it nice and cold, and then I'm just going to simply strain this out over a nice large rock. I'll just express it over the top, get those orange essences on the top of the drink, simply slide it down the side, and there is your Rittenhouse Rye Old Fashioned.
I love this one. Again, this is like how it should be. Pretty simple. I mean, minus the sick juggling. Orange Express on top. Again, you'll probably find the closer it is to the one I make, the more I like what they did. But yeah, no, I think that's really great. I think that's a really solid drink.
I work in a pretty high volume bar, and even in a nightlife setting, old fashions are definitely in the top selling cocktails. So I'm going to go in with 3 heavy dashes. Angostura is one of the most staining ingredients of all time.
Yep.
Next is simple syrups. I like to build in the glass for an old fashioned or a stirred down cocktail because it's faster and it gives the same quality cocktail as if you were to build it in a mixing glass.
That's actually kind of true. It's fine if you were to build like an old fashioned in the glass, as long as you stir it. And if you can measure, speed bartenders are typically very good at it's either one of two things. They're either typically good at free pouring, which is where you pour without the measuring things, or it doesn't matter because of where they are, right? They often work in like nightclubs or high volume places where it's just about, again, people don't want the best drink in the world. They just don't want a bad drink. As long as it's mid or better, they're good.
And then our final ingredient is going to be Old Forester. So I'm going to go in with 2 ounces. This is 86 proof bourbon, so you don't want to knock someone out just off of 1. You want to be responsible, especially when you're serving alcohol, right? I do have large cubes here. So we're just going to place that down into our cocktail.
The way she said I have large cubes here makes me feel, and this is a guess, that where she works, they typically serve it with small cubes, and that she's just doing the large cubes they gave it to her, which is fine, by the way. Like, you can serve it with small cubes. Like, that's a fine old fashioned, but it will dilute faster.
And once again, we're going to go in 2 spoons and give her maybe 20 to 30 stirs. An orange peel complements the notes of the bourbon really nicely, whereas a lemon is going to complement the notes of rye. Peel side out. And I really do like to wipe it around the side of the glass so that when you pick up the glass and bring it to your face, you smell the peels. That's our old fashioned.
Cool.
This is my version of the old-fashioned drink. It's kind of like Japanese style tea and cacao old-fashioned. Let's make it. Nice.
I'm amped for this. Tea and cacao old fashioned. I don't know if I've ever had anything like that.
The Los Expro Tobara.
Okay, mezcal.
And white cacao liqueur. 15.
White cacao liqueur.
For the
Okay.
sweetness.
Yeah, this is going to be a
And
sweeter.
a little Japanese whiskey for body.
Also should have
this
whiskey.
is a bitter element and main kind of like tea flavor profile. So this moment I'm using the Kyoto Uji matcha. The color is totally different. It's very
Really
black
sick.
and less bitterness. It's a beautiful balance of the bitterness. Yes. This is like a natural Angostura bitters.
I don't know if it's a natural Angostura bitters, but I understand what he's saying. It does have a bitter flavor. Also, my wife loves a matcha. Maybe she would like this. This is cool. She likes mezcal, okay? We'll see.
Trying it. I'm trying to stir. Also gentle. This is a hot coconut water.
Cool.
30 ml. I don't want to get super cold temperature. And of course, no bubble, but for the tea, so you need to get the creamy like texture of the Whipple matcha. It's a two element and combined together. You get a lot of aroma from beautiful matcha and beautiful foam.
I mean, that's pretty sick looking. Like, I don't know. It's not anything close to, but he's not saying it's like a classic. He's saying it's like his own thing, like his Japanese style, old fashioned. I think that looks awesome. I would love to try that.
Perfect. So on the top is a Hana Hojiso. It's a shiso flower. Each flower has shiso flavor. After a couple sip, take a bite and drink. Enjoy.
That's a piece of art, man. Like, look at that thing. That guy, this guy's winning. This guy's winning. It's really cool.
The Old Fashioned is a really easy drink to learn as a home bartender. If I did it, anyone can. I'm going to take just a little bit of sugar.
That's the spirit, Kevin. But also, it's true. It is easy.
You want probably about a teaspoon. This is one of those things that over time you can figure out what you like or what someone else likes in terms of the sweetness of it. I'm going to use just a couple dashes of these.
I'm going to make a bet here that as a home bartender, he is going to use the syrup from the Luxardo. I saw his little can of Luxardos in the drink. That's my guess.
Angostura bitters, which is going to give the drink a really good complexity. And then I am going to take just a little bit of water and dump that in just to give a teensy bit more liquid to mix in with the sugar. Then you can take a muddling stick or a spoon or whatever it is to get that sugar nice and melted up. I like to muddle in the glass just because I like doing fewer dishes. I'm going to throw in some ice because, again, we love a chilled cocktail. Let's throw in just...
I would tell you, bud. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think this is fine, actually. If you were going to put in ice, should you put it in first? No, you want the bitters on the... You need to do the sugar. Yeah, you're doing this right. I'm sorry. How dare I? You are crushing it, Kevin. Keep going.
It's a little bit of that, which looks good. Let's just a little bit more there. You just want to get it to where it is mixed up. You know what? That's looking a little light. I might toss in just a little bit more of this. I pour until the ancestors tell me to stop on this one. And the Luxardo cherries are worth the investment. They are a little bit more expensive, but they last a really super long time in the syrup. I'm going to take a bit of this orange and rim it around the glass just to give it a little bit of a flavor. And then I'm just going to rub this to activate the orange flavor. Drop it in, give it one final little stir. And there you go. My home old fashioned.
I think that's pretty good. Yeah, man. I don't think you need to rub your orange. I think you could just, and it'll be a little bit easier for you. But I think that pretty good job. There's nothing like, good job, dude.
Some people order old fashions at a neighborhood bar. I like to be fully transparent. In a neighborhood bar, we don't have turbinado sugar. So I say, I can make you an old fashioned, but I'm going to use simple syrup. Is that all right? And most people say it's fine. But then occasionally you get the person's like, oh, I'll just take a shot of Fireball and a Bud Light instead, as if that's like a normal juxtaposition. We don't have space for mixing glasses. And it's such an infrequently ordered cocktail that those mixing glasses that are super delicate, they break. And it's not worth it. For me, I just build it right in the glass. So I start with a couple dashes of Angostura bitters. One of the benefits of using simple syrup is that you don't need to put a splash of club soda or water in it. The only reason people don't love that is because it's a little sweeter, but it's fine. For building in the glass, I just put everything in first and then I add the ice, probably like 3 cubes of ice. This is a blend of an Irish whiskey and a rye. It is 80 proof, but it's so smooth and it finishes with a little bit of that pepper, but it's not overpowering. When people use high proof alcohol in high volume bars, you're just kind of asking for trouble. Also, you don't make money if you get them too drunk too fast. And then I just do a little twist of orange just so that you get the aroma of it, because especially with the simple, it's sweet enough that I don't muddle fruit. I don't waste my time with all that. And the way that this is done, that last sip is going to be your sweet sip, which is going to make you want to order that next drink. So this is my old fashioned.
This girl actually crush. I think this girl's really cool. I like that she tells people, hey, I don't have, cane sugar, so it's going to be a little sweeter. I like that she's not like, she's like, look, this is a neighborhood bar. Like, people come here for a shot and a beer, right? Or a whiskey soda, or that kind of energy. As somebody who lives half a block from a neighborhood bar that I don't frequent, but I've been there. I go there sometimes, right? And I have lots of friends who go there. I love that she did the punch out. So that thing where she took the orange and punched out the that's like a normal like bartender hack for places that are like either high volume or they're like neighborhood style bars or airport bars or things like that. It is interesting that she chose an Irish whiskey for an old fashioned. There is something called like an Irish old fashioned, which is just that, it's an Irish whiskey. Not necessarily what I would choose, but I also, if you're a neighborhood bar, I don't know necessarily if somebody is going to give a shit that much. And it is kind of sweet. And it's still better than ordering like a Jack Daniels old fashioned. I think that sucks. Don't do that. Or do it if it makes you happy. But I am judging you. You're being judged.
All right. Cheers.
I give you one of my favorite cocktails.
Okay. So there we go. That was the video on how to make old fashions and stuff. And yeah, I thought that was pretty fun. I think most of these people, I mean, they're all fine to really good. Obviously, I have my opinions on it. And there you go. I'm glad I reacted to this. If you're glad I reacted to this, please tell me. And if you're not glad, keep that shit to yourself. I don't want to hear about it. If you want more videos like this, or if you're like, AJ, you're really judgmental, why don't you show us how you make an old fashioned? You let me know in the comments below. And maybe my next video will be me making an old fashioned the right way, which is similar to how some of these guys and gals did it. Thanks Epicurious for making that video too. I'll link that video in the comments below, even though I would be shocked if somebody hadn't seen that video and then saw mine. Thank you so much. Subscribe for more stuff, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.